So sorry, not sorry. So, I'm Evil Mog. I'm redacted for redacted. I have certifications. They are redacted and redacted and redacted. I'm a bishop for the newly formed Church of Wi-Fi. I'm a member of Team Hashcat, and I might have been building crypto clusters for a while. Ish. Maybe. Kind of. So, disclaimer. This talk is not officially sanctioned by anybody. My opinions are mine and mine alone. All content in this talk is my opinion based on experience. Please don't sue me, AMD, because your stuff sucks. There will likely be inaccuracies of content that are controversial. I'm not sorry. All references to we are in relation to a hypothetical spherical monkey in a vacuum and in no way referring to any entity real or imagined at all, in any way, shape, and or form. And my PowerPoint skills are terrible. I don't care. Suck it. This is also the anti-Warby talk. For those of you who don't know, Steve Warby gave a talk on Derbycon 1 about how it's cheaper and more effective to crack stuff in the cloud. Nah, my clusters can beat Amazon EC2 any day of the week. Don't try it, it sucks. Sorry, Steve. So, why are we here? I'm sitting on IRC a lot at work. It's just outside and on the side of my desk. And every once in a while, we'll have somebody come on in and come up with their Litecoin cluster because their, Litecoin took a dive and they figure, let's go try password cracking. And they'd usually set their house on fire. Like I got an angry email the other week going, hey, your instructions for some thing I set up, I followed them to the letter and, hooked up 14 rigs on a 15 amp power supply and 110 volt and my house burnt down. Sorry. So, I'm getting tired of this Freenode crap. So this is what my talk's about is how not to set your house on fire and how to do this right. Go big, go home, but do it correctly. It's like when we dropped the monkey from the 18th floor. We did the math, spent 2 days, overnighted gear from Apogee Rockets. You do stuff properly in this world. So I'm going to talk you how to do it through properly, and maybe you won't set your house on fire. If you do, my insurance doesn't cover your stupidity, so good luck. So, power. Power, power, power. Power is the killer in this world. We use 240 volt, 20 amp to 30 amp feeds almost exclusively. Why? Because on 110, you're typically going to max out your feed on a single system relatively quickly. Like we're pulling, on average, about 7.5 amps on 240 volt, which will probably melt things with the wrong cables. So switch to the higher gear, save yourself some pain. Also, use some metered PDUs. It's really nice to know how much amperage these things can draw because you will set stuff on fire. I've done it. It happens. Make sure you have a really good fire department on standby. Make sure your facility guys love you. Don't do this in your garage. Don't do this in your basement. When you're running 60 of these things, it kind of gets a little hot.
Do it in the data center at work.
Yeah, do it in a data center at work. For small 4 GPU systems, we're using 1,500 watt platinum supplies. Don't cheap out and buy a 700 watt bronze rated. I bought it from Fry's Electronics for $5 from some guy named Al. Things melt. And when they melt spectacularly. I've seen scorched holes in my gear. I burn out systems on average. I kill a power supply or two a year, even with this stuff. So I can't imagine the garbage they use in these Litecoin clusters. Stuff will catch on fire. For the larger tie-in boxes, we're using triple redundant power supplies. Usually hooked up to big 60 amp feeds and everything else. Just because stuff works. Also, people are using those cheap, crappy PCI Express cables they'll buy overnight from China. Those things will catch fire in 5 seconds. Just don't do it. Again, fire, fire, fire. It happens. Running a Hashcat cluster sucks a lot of power. A lot of power. I think my power bill for running a single dual node at my house was $300 a month. And I actually got an email about that the other day going, hey, this cluster is sucking me back $12,000 a month or $1,200 a month on power. What the hell? How do we reduce the power consumption? Easy answer. Either get lower power cards or just don't do it. Running a large cluster is not for the faint of heart. The average hobbyist, run it in the data center at work. Your average hobbyist can survive with 4 GPUs, maybe 2. Just don't run it for 24/7 because these things are kind of power hungry, especially AMD stuff. The newer NVIDIAs run about 185 watts a card, and they don't suck as much, but they still suck. Oh yeah, my favorite part. Do not use PCI Express extenders. Let me reiterate that. Don't use them. People will use them in a Litecoin rig because they will buy the cheapest motherboard they can find. It's about $100 on average. It might have a couple of X1 connectors, so you can rig up 6 cards to them. You do this on Hashcat, you'll either burn out your motherboard, You'll put a big smoking hole in your video card. You'll kill an ASIC, fry an FPGA. You'll have a $500 paperweight or more of them. And, yeah, just don't do that. Oh, yeah, and make sure you use proper motherboards. Don't buy your $100 motherboards. We use, like, the Republic of Gamers, 4-rig, server-rated components. And we still burn up motherboards every other month. Like, this stuff, when you're running 24/7, 365 with no breaks, it kind of kills systems, so make sure you got a budget for it. Like, we're about 20 grand a year-ish on average in card replacements. It happens. Yeah, it burns out boards really, really bad. Actually, RenderMan burns out boards really, really badly.
You're the one that gave me access.
Defcoin, yeah, I'll show you some slides on this in a bit. We might have been responsible for killing Defcoin. I'm sorry, but not sorry.
And pissing off facilities to no end.
Oh, yeah, so here's the other part. People try and buy non-reference cards all the time because they're cheaper or they look funkier. Now, for those of you who don't know what a reference card versus a non-reference card is, a reference card, like from NVIDIA or AMD, is their exact spec, the one you see on the picture. They all look the same. Some of them have slightly better components, but the big difference is their fans blow the air front and back as opposed to down. Now, say you have 8 of these things crammed in a chassis with a non-reference card, the fans will grind the card below and blow 110 degrees Celsius air down to the card below, causing it to melt, likely causing a fire, both from the shitty power and from the general melt, so it gets kind of messy. And for those of you wondering why I'm bashing AMD, they have this thing called Power Tune. It's how they keep within their thermal design envelope. They call it 300 watts, but it's closer to 400. And these things will burn out your motherboard in seconds. So the 290Xs and up have a bad habit of destroying boards. So we've switched all to the NVIDIA cards because they're 150 watts, 175 watts a card for the same performance. When you get to this kind of scale, it's all about price per watt as opposed to price per performance. So that's why we're switching to those. If you want to go switch to your order of preference, the Titan X cards, oh my god, I want tons of those. They're great. But GTX 980s, they're about $500 Canadian. They work. They're bulletproof. I have not yet seen one fail in the field yet. So we have been away for a week, and they haven't been running. The new Fury sucks as well. Just sorry. Everyone's saying AMD's going to come back, but I think they're slowly dying, and their drivers suck. They've got one driver developer working in China 2 days a week. Cooling. So, one little trick I found out is you need a biblical amount of air. That's the only way of describing it. If you think you've got enough airflow, triple it, add some more, and then you might maybe have it work. You still need supplementary cooling on top of this, especially if you're using desktop-grade boards. Their fans just can't get the proper airflow. If you want to cheat and buy a high-grade tie-in from Sakita Systems or those guys, their stuff actually works, but otherwise, fans, more fans. Problem with water is it has a habit of leaking randomly, and when you're running this much gear, I'm lazy. I don't want to go start checking my water pumps all the time. I look at my gear when it breaks, and I'm lazy. So if you want to run water, if you want to run water on your rig and blow up a $1,000 board and then kill a bunch of video cards, be my guest. Don't come crying to me on Hashcat because I'm not going to help you at all ever. The rack servers aren't bad. The tie-in boards, the big 8-way GPU ones they use in the render streams, on the VDACT 8R and everything else, those things work like a hot damn. They put basically 2 banks of fans, top and bottom, and then they're 2 or 3 deep, and they push 300 CFM, 400 CFM across the cards, and they sound like a jet engine taking off, but they work. Which also leads to the other question we get. My card is so loud on a hash cracking run. Why does it sound like a jet engine? That's airflow. That is the sound of life. Don't stick this in your home entertainment center and wonder why it's so loud. I'm not responsible for relationships ended because your GPU rig woke your wife up at night. Just saying, it's happened. I got that email. It was funny as hell. So, back to the lazy topic. I am extremely, extremely lazy. When you're running 14, 15, 16 nodes. Every time you swap cards out, it's recommended to rebuild your systems, your control nodes or your cluster nodes. So I have a little USB boot stick based off of, some pre-seed files and everything else. And do an auto install, color a day, same settings, just automate that component. We're all running Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. It works. It doesn't die. The thing with when you're running a cluster this size is we don't stick with bleeding edge. We stick with what works. Because when you're running 24/7, you don't want to deal with a bug that, 4 hours into your run and go, oh my god, my drivers have some weird incompatibility and it crashes half your nodes. Stick to what's stable. Get something like Linux COE, Ubuntu MAS, Foreman. There's 50 ways to skin in this cat. We're all security. We can hack something together. Also, get Puppet, Ansible, Salt, Rundeck, some kind of systems automation utility, because if you are actually SSHing into your boxes to go manage these things, you're doing it wrong. I never actually log onto my clusters unless they break. And when you've got them running forever, I like a little web interface on my phone, all nice and properly secured. Hit a button, rebuild a node, add a patch. Because sitting with apt-get update for 14 hours because you're not doing automation, it takes time, and when you're doing this professionally, you don't have more than a couple hours to run these clusters, right? I have a real job as well rather than just doing this stuff, so except for managing you, which is a full-time job in and of itself, yes, I apparently have a real job.
He's my manager, by the way, so my duty to manage him.
Render man, no one manages you. You're an
setting the building on fire.
Exactly.
You seem to be trying to do so on your own.
This is true, exactly. So, you see, there's no manager here. There's just unindicted co-conspirators, so we're all good. So, clustering. Back about 3 years ago, anyone here remember something called VCL or SuperCL? All the cool kids were doing it. There's some article that Jeremy Gosney put out about a 25 GPU cluster cracking everything. We all got the emails. Everyone's all freaking out about them. Well, VCL never actually worked. Like, it kind of worked, but it used kind of InfiniBand to go handle all its back-end clustering. It was finicky, prone to errors. It crashed. It wouldn't load that many hashes. You get maybe 100,000 in it before it broke. It just didn't quite work, but it was enough as a showpiece that it kind of tolerated things. So Adam got pissed off at this because he got tired of patching the thing, and he made something called -skip, -limit, and -keyspace. So what you can do now is you can go make your own cluster software. Basically what a -skip, -limit, and -keyspace is you feed it an attack, give it -keyspace, it spits out how long it's going to be able to crack. Then you can say, I'm going to limit this to the first 50,000 hits on this, and you can go skip ahead in the keychain component. So it's like a giant enhanced restore file effectively, only from the command line. So if I'm going to distribute a job to a couple hundred nodes, just bring up a bash script, use some NFS, SCP things over, and stuff just works. Every clustering software on the market using Hashcat relies on this very technique. Whether it's Hashstack, whether you're using Hashtopus, whether you're using dist.hc, they all use the same thing. It's super low bandwidth because you just have to send a job down, and then your wordless loads take a while, but otherwise it's easy as eating pancakes. So, your cluster controllers. This is the thing people underspec badly. Your cluster controllers basically, at least if you're using Hashtopus, is a giant MySQL database server with a really crappy Apache front end with no TLS or SSL, so it's a piece of junk, but it does a lot of database work. So this is just a standard spec for a database server. Use a lot of RAM, use a lot of disk, throw a big-ass NIC on it, and you should be roughly okay. Your mileage might vary depending on how crappy your data center is, but it'll work. Some people do this stuff over the internet. If you put a Hashtopus cluster on the internet, you deserve to get pwned. Sorry. So, middleware. Middleware is the software used to distribute your jobs to the clients. It's basically, you have an agent on your client, you've got your server at the back end, and it just spits out jobs all day long. If you're lazy, like really, really lazy, and you have a lot of money, you can buy Hashstack. We have some of their hardware. Their hardware works great. I'm not a fan of their software. I mean, it's good, it's turnkey, but you can't use things like the latest beta builds. You have to use the existing repos, and because I'm on the beta team, we get new hash modes all the time, like the new Ashley Madison leaks and a few others. We're testing those out, so we can't exactly use those on production gear, so we have to use the crappy open source stuff. But if you want to make stuff that just works, grab Hashstack. But you really don't need middleware. You don't. You can do it all in bash scripts. I did it in spreadsheets, but that's what we do for contests is, load up Google Docs, say, here, everyone run these -L, here's your attacks, farm it off to some kid in tuck that's willing to burn his house down, and, or send it out to your botnet. That works too. I've seen Hashcat loaded into a botnet that accepts the EULA, fires it off someone's nodes, and makes people's fans spin really loud. Hey, looks like someone's watching my talks. So yeah, so we're going to rant about Hashstack again. It is fully commercially supported. His gear, if you burn out a motherboard, he'll overnight you one. If you burn out a video card, he'll overnight you one. You pay a lot more for his stuff, but it's all OPEX versus CAPEX. For us, CAPEX is for repairs for our non-Hashstack nodes. This whole thing is purely operating dollars, so it kind of works. But your mileage may vary. You're a bunch of hackers. You can figure it out. No one that does a cluster this size really talks about what they use because they all have their secret sauce, but it's usually based on one of these variants. So, Hashtopus. About 2 years ago, a guy named Curly Boy created some abomination of a cluster software. It's basically a C#.NET app on the back end running in mono on Linux with PHP on a Linux box. There's no security on the website whatsoever, no ACLs, no SSL, no TLS. Needs some tinkering to make it work. But once you set up your firewalls on UFW and you secure the whole thing with VPNs and everything else, it kind of works okay, and it's what we mainly use. Best part is I can throw 100,000 rule files at it, and it just goes through and chunks them through. So, it works, but your mileage may vary again. It's kind of like the IKEA of password cracking software. My favorite method, though, is the manual distribution method. Using bash scripts, you can copy things over. If you're cheap, this works as well. Again, we just use -skip, -limit, set up a list. If you want to go copy it, this line right here, the OCL hashcat 64.bin, that's exactly how the software does it. It's just, set up a limit, fire it off, update your spreadsheets. Now for the fun stuff. The stuff that's not in your cluster software. This stuff...
Did you actually tell them, what we're running? What the specs are?
Once we turn off the video camera.
Okay.
So, if you have a large cluster and it's idle, which happens a lot, you have a couple of options. You can sit idle and do nothing. You can generate altcoins like RenderMan did and crash the Defcoin economy, which is funny as heck. Or you can try random attacks. And when I say random, I mean really random. Go try this someday. Go take an NFS mount, put all your clusters on there, go set up a script that loops through all your word lists with -G100,000. It generates 100,000 random rules. And just set up a debug mode so it captures all the rules that catch, and let it sit there for 6 months, just because you can. Then when you're bored, collect all the debug files, clean them all up a little bit, and submit them to Hashcat as generated 2.rule. A couple of people here actually have used this rule. Apparently, it's really, really effective. It's more effective than some of the human-generated rules, but I didn't actually do any of this work. It was just all the machine, so the computer's apparently smarter than I am. Yes, render?
I ain't saying it.
So other attacks you can do, Chort wrote a nice little article on the cut B attack. So anyone here familiar with Chinese takeout? Yeah, exactly. So what this is basically, every Chinese restaurant's always like Wind Dragon, Golden Dragon, Peking Duck, etc. So there's a tool in the Hashcat utilities called cut B, and what it does is you can give it a variable to go select either the first 8, first 2, first 4, last 2, last 8, last 4. So there's a script there he actually has on his website that you can run through and collect all the various iterations of this, and then you run through Hashcat's -A1 attack, and it kind of does a similar password splicing technique. So there's prefix pending, postfix pending. We call it the Chinese takeout attack at work. It actually have a rule called takeout.post, which is fully processed. It takes about 4 days to run on my cluster, and it breaks 24-character passwords with random prefix pending, postfix pending, stuff in the middle. It's just ridiculous. We've had 40 gigs of word lists into it, generated a 300 meg -A1 half side, and it's brutal. If you get cracked by this, you probably will. I'm sorry. The other one, who here knows about Adam's Prince attack? No one? Okay. So about a year ago, Adam made some software that... Anyone here remember AutoCrack? All right, so AutoCrack got deprecated because it just kind of stopped working. So Adam made a new variant of it that feeds some rules in, just continually keeps modifying your word list based on things it's finding, so you'll never actually run out of stuff to crack. So you throw it on a node, and it did the LinkedIn hashes, like 80% of them in a day on just a single node. You can't cluster it, but it does some pretty intelligent stuff. You throw it on it, leave it on it, and you set it running. The other thing we do is we'll just try random stuff, like take expander, run it through prepare, run it through permute, combine them, throw them through rule lists, then re-expand them, re-permute them, rerun them through cut B. Basically, just jumble everything up and throw it at it and see what sticks against the wall. It pretty works well on NTLM, MD5. Just try random stuff because you'll spend a lot of time idle when you have a cluster this big. So, here's the one we all love. How I destroyed a crypto economy. Or more particularly, how RenderMan destroyed a crypto economy. I give you all the credit on this one.
Hey, it's nice and warm under this bus.
I'm kidding. So we had some idle cycles. We had no jobs running. We had to do some extended maintenance and some other stuff. So we're like, let's see what this whole Litecoin thing's about. We're going to do... The reason why we chose Defcoin is we have a rule at work where we can't use the cluster for personal gain in any way, shape, and or form. So we figured Defcoin's never going to take off, so let's ensure it doesn't take off and use it for research. So Hashcat rigs make great space heaters. They do, and great Litecoin miners. They take some tweaking, and he got the whole thing working pretty good. So,
Should I just talk?
Yeah, actually, go for it.
Hey, RenderMan. He's my manager, so...
Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, Defcoin came out, they released it on April 1st. So the first thing I did was I had to text Jeff Boss, Dark Tangent, and say, is this actually a legit thing, or are we suddenly going to be doing are we going to be accidentally mining for somebody else or something? And he's like, no, it's a legit thing. It's a project. People asked me about it. It gave permission to use the Defcon name. So it's basically Litecoin, just a variant of Litecoin. Saw this, and it's like, wait, we got lots of, GPU cycles. What can we do with this? I'm thinking, okay, hacker currency, Defcoin, everything, this is like a playground, sandbox for all this cryptocurrency stuff. Well, yeah, it went downhill from there, so just...
Yeah, it works. So basically the moral of the story is boredom, 50 mega hashes per second Litecoin hash rate, which was effectively Defcoin.
Get bored.
Yes. We mined 755,000 Defcoin in 3 months. We were 70 to 75% of the network hash rate. So I don't know the Suba pool. That was the largest pool for the initial launch of it. Yeah, that was basically all us. They had to upgrade their rig 3 or 4 times just because we kept overloading their gear. We started spreading pools around just to go kind of hide it, but everyone figured out it was us. RenderMan was debating rolling up in a pimp suit with paper wallets to Defcoin and just bathing the place and making it rain. In fact, we got some pictures here of when our air conditioning failed for that pool. So that was the pool hash rate, and here was the network hash rate. So pretty significant. This was May. We had a building-wide air conditioning failure because we were running these things pretty hard at the time, and facilities was hating us because we had alarms going off at 3 in the morning because they were killing building air conditioning at midnight and then turning it back on at 6. Someone didn't get the memo. Crypto cluster. Yeah, so I had to educate them, and things got all fixed up, but I figured that people were wondering why the difficulty dropped so sudden. Well, that's exactly why. So, Defcoin lessons learned. When making a new cryptocurrency, make sure it's GPU resistant. If you're making something for hackers, they will hack it. We submitted a talk to them, and they kind of rejected our talk because we apparently, they wanted it to be a thing.
They wanted Defcoin to actually be a thing, not just a playground.
Yeah. So if you're making a cryptocurrency for con people like me, we will mess with it. I'm sorry. First rule of the internet, it's going to get messed with. And, yeah, when you're submitting a talk to DEFCON about destroying their cryptocurrency, be nice about it. And don't show up in a pimp suit with 750,000 DEFCOin and paper wallets. Crypto cluster lessons learned. Have adequate airflow. Let me reiterate that. Have biblical airflow. If you think God himself is coming in with a crap ton of air and it's like Hurricane Sandy inside your data center, you might have enough, maybe. Automate everything. Because when stuff dies, you want to be able to handle the failure automatically. Because I hate getting up at 3 in the morning just because a node failed. That's where middleware comes in. It'll handle the failure for you if you actually use the right stuff. Build your systems correctly. Don't set your stuff on fire. Overbuild, overspec, overbuild. Excess is good here. Make sure your building air conditioning works, like actually works, not just fails on you randomly, because when one of these things failed, we actually did destroy 4 video cards. I've actually got a wall of 40 7970 OCs in my lab. We call it the wall of dead soldiers. Have a nice crypto cluster controller. Don't use junk cables. Don't use junk cables. Don't use PCI Express extenders. It's a sin in the Church of Wi-Fi. We're adding it to the list. It's in the commandments. And read the manual. Read the forums. Ask questions. But before I ask questions, please read the manual. Because I'm not answering another question on your rig set my place on fire. So, credits. Yeah, I've been doing this for 5 years. I stand on the shoulders of giants. Pure Hate, Adam, Minga, Chort, Epicsoit, Bitweasel, Unix Ninja, every member of Team Hashcat, they've all saved my ass on countless times, so none of this would be a possibility without them. Steve Werby, thank you for the inspiration to make the anti-Werby talk. Sorry, not sorry. And I'd also like to thank my army of selfless robot overlords. You're far more effective than interns, and I pay you less than Murdoch.
Yes, he has a Twitter account.
So, questions. I'm EvilMog on Freenode, #Hashcat. I'm on the Hashcat forums. I'm EvilMog on Twitter, only during conference season. So if you have any questions at all, I might answer. There might be snarky answers, but I will answer. So, questions. Define passively.
Like the ZNPs that came out for very cheap that don't have any fans on them.
You answered your question right there. Don't.
Don't use them at all.
Don't. Those little fanless nanos that you're talking about, or those little fanless boxes, use biblical airflow. But if you want to use a crappy chassis, any skeleton chassis should work, but if you don't have the right airflow, these cards will set on fire. The new NVIDIAs will work out rather well, but if you're using AMD, like the 7970s, the 5870s, the 6990s, those things need a lot of airflow. Like, keep them fed, keep them happy, because the little thing people don't know with these cards is they don't fail immediately. They have creeping errors in your crypto calculations, and like you have ASIC hangs, FPGA hangs, and the cards start acting wonky right when they get close to failure, but they don't quite fail for another 2 months afterwards. So you have to toss out half your results. So just keep your cards happy. Any other questions? No, hell no. If you want to use a rack server, go with like a 4U or 5U. Like the Chenbro ones are awesome. The tie-in chassis are great. Supermicro makes some really good chassis. But yeah, 4U, 5U minimum if you're doing anything proper. That and most of your video cards won't fit in a 2U chassis. They're a bit too tall, so. 120, 130 Celsius on the card itself. And internally, I'm about 60, 70 Celsius. Before the airflow kicks in and blows it all out.
How many systems are you able to get into a single rack for your?
I usually take about 2 systems per rack total if you're doing like a desktop grade thing sitting on an open shelf. But if you're using like the tie-ins, they're 5U, so I can cram the whole damn thing. As long as you have power and cooling for it. There have been some reports of a guy with 48U of these things fully crammed, fully stocked. I don't want to know what his power bill is.
That literally is Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, that is Hurricane Katrina, which is oddly enough my wife's name. So shout out to Katrina. Thank you. I love you. Anybody else? Don't use PCI splitters. Don't use PCI extenders. Basically, just use the X16 slots, and if the card fits in the chassis, you're good to go. If you have to use an extender or a splitter, you're doing it wrong. Anyone else? Bueller? Cool. We can kill